Well, thank you. My name is Kathleen Dent, and I am co-founder and CEO of Inspired Classroom here in Missoula, Montana. And we are so excited to have you, Stephanie, with us, and also to welcome our special guest, Chris Hyslop, who is with the Montana World Affairs Council, also here in Missoula. And we do these mentor meetups every month just to get together a community of practice of people who have the goal of having educational outreach to adults, to students, and across their area, their region, and who have amazing content to share. And so we have worked really a lot for the last 7 years with organizations to try and help them do that. And so we just like to get together and talk. And so this is more of just a conversation, not a formal presentation or anything. But we'd love to hear a little bit about what you're doing, Stephanie, but I'm going to go ahead and let Chris introduce himself a little bit more.
Very good. Well, thanks a lot, Kathleen, for having me on. And Stephanie, good to meet you. Good to see you out there in Helena. I'm Chris Hyslop. I'm the Executive Director of the Montana World Affairs Council. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit that tries to foster engagement in the world in our Montana communities and in our Montana schools. And so we do that in a lot of different ways. But what brings us here with Kathleen is for the past 7 years, we've been doing virtual programs in partnership with Inspired Classroom, for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is the obvious one, Montana being such a big place and so difficult to convene groups of students or community members outside of a couple 100-mile radius. And so, of course, the use of the virtual space for us in reaching out to communities, to schools, to organizations, to partners, I mean, it's become just the normal way in which we work. It's no longer a kind of special thing. And so, as I said, that's been going on for 7 years, but you add to it our experience over the past 18 months or so with COVID, and the necessity to really make a turn from our what was at one time a lot of in-person programming with a little bit of virtual programming into an entire virtual program over the past 18 months that is only now slowly including some in-person events. And coming out of this as well is, the very interesting hybrid events, having in-person and online across a number of channels, reaching people in ways that we didn't imagine. I think when we began working with Inspired Classroom, it was a very kind of dedicated, we're having a program. We had a few students and classrooms online, but this is kind of morphing into strange and interesting ways that I think we can talk more in detail later. But anyway, that's a little bit of background of who we are and what we do.
Great, thanks, Chris. Stephanie, we'd love to hear a little bit about Archie Bray. Chris, have you been to Archie Bray?
I've not been to Archie Bray, but I've been to Helena a number of times, but I'd like to hear more.
Next time you go over there, it's quite the experience. And Stephanie, we'd love to hear a little bit about what you guys are doing and how you've been impacted, and maybe even some ideas of what you'd like to do.
Yeah, well, so the Archie Bray is a nonprofit ceramic arts center. We have a residency program, gallery exhibitions, but also clay business, and also an educational space. I am brand new to the Bray as their new educational manager. Because the pandemic really shuttered the education department here, which led to some transitions and shifts in thinking. And one of my jobs is to get us up and running with some of the programs we were doing, but also rethinking what education could be for the Archie Bray and the ceramic arts. I think everyone right now is having to plan a little A and B. And so we want to get in person going again, but we also want to take advantage of what we learned with the virtual offerings that the pandemic has made available and more accessible to people. So that was my main interest in joining in today was to kind of hear about some of the strategies and ways you've been able to engage students virtually that goes beyond just, a dry Zoom interaction or,
or a static lesson plan on the website kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what are your primary target audiences for outreach?
So we've got a wide net right now. Certainly local outreach with local partnerships and nonprofits, working with schools both in Helena and in Montana, but also we've started to do a few pilot programs that are at the very beginning stages of working with national outreach with other larger programs on the East Coast or in other parts of the United States.
And when you're saying students, is it primarily K-12 or is it adult learners too?
Both, really.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All demographics of students, traditional students, but also working in outreach in communities that don't always have access to the arts. Yeah.
And I think, Chris, maybe you can speak to that and the goals of the Montana World Affairs Council with the underserved students, because I know that was one of your big goals of going virtual.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So for us, we kind of use the term remote, rural, and reservation schools. And that is also known, AKA underserved, AKA Title IX, or what is it? It's not Title IX. Catherine, help me.
Title
I schools and other kind of, they're often go by their kind of socioeconomic metric, which governments track them by, for better or for worse, by the way. But all of that being said, it's simply to say that, those are the schools that have the least opportunity to engage in the content of our work, and I would guess the content of your work, and who, dare I say, have the most to gain, since, a lot of schools here, if I just look around my neighborhood here in Missoula, for instance, in the high schools and middle schools, there's a lot on offer. And if it isn't on offer, then, the city and Arts Missoula and different nonprofits have a pretty wide range of services across a lot of interesting things that are available to students and adults. And so while our programs are open and free to all people, we recognize that, we need to make a special effort and an extra effort to get the word out to those schools that are a bit further afield from the call it 6 or 7 urban centers here in Montana. So we try, and I'll come on, a point that we can talk about, later is about on the, call it marketing and promotion, communication, what have you. That aspect of the work is maybe another separate conversation, but know that from our perspective, that those are the people we're really interested in reaching for I think so many of the obvious reasons. And we like to then, we communicate that very clearly and openly with people who are interested in supporting our work. Because on one hand, we say, if you do a virtual program, what we tell our donors and sponsors here, many of whom maybe like you, Stephanie, we have a range of income and revenue and support. But I'm talking about those, there's this kind of mid-level where you have banks and law firms and these kind of community private sector businesses that have money to support work like ours. And in communicating with them, they want to know that you're working in their constituencies. And we are, of course, primarily we're focused on Montana. So for those very important partners and sponsors, we're able to very honestly and transparently say our real focus here is on Montana classrooms, and particularly rural and remote and underserved areas. However, that's all said, we're online. There are no borders here. It's completely wide open. And we've kind of been talking with Kathleen and Allie and considering ways in which our content and our, what we're purveying can you keep a kind of focus on Montana, but can you go beyond Montana and still stay relevant to our constituency who wants to know that, first off, just back to this slice of support. Let's just take a bank. A bank is interested, and in supporting an organization whose work deals with the people within their market area. And the further afield from the main town you get, the more interesting it is for them, because they also want to, for their own purposes, to show that their support is going beyond the kind of main town, if you will. So again, primarily Montana stuff, but now we're talking about how do you get beyond that, and then there's a number of add-ons here that I guess, Kathleen, you'll have to lead us through. One is the challenge platform is an interesting topic, and the other interesting topic is multiple channels. There are multiple channels available to us that we all know about, and I knew about, but it wasn't until kind of last spring where I realized the power of doing something with Inspired Classroom while at the same time going on Facebook Live, while at the same time podcasting the audio, while at the same time, putting up an edited version on YouTube, and all of these ways and means and channels that you can get your content out there. I think to a pro marketer, that's like obviously, but for me as a kind of harried ED who's just trying to, keep head above water, it was a major sea change, because for the simple reason, I guess, Stephanie and others who may be watching this also, it's important for us to have our metrics to know how many people are we reaching in our program. We have to know for our own kind of programmatic use, so we know what we're doing, but we have to translate that into better program design, and we have to translate that into communication to our supporters, so we can say, this year the program that you supported reached 5,416 people. And so increasing the channels through which you are sending out your content increases your reach. And so that's been also another, maybe Kathleen, I hand back to you to see which subset of this conversation you want to pursue.
Yeah, well, it is kind of a big picture. And that's one thing that through the years we've learned from our clients. Stephanie, both Allie and I, my co-founder and I, are both teachers. We come from that teaching background, and so that's how we started out. And the World Affairs Council was one of our first clients, and what they did is they came to us and they said, hey, we've got contact with these ambassadors and consul generals and people from the world, and we'd love to get those into high school classrooms. So when we were thinking, and this was 7 years ago, so when we were thinking about virtual programs, that's where it started. And as we talk to clients, that's typically where we start is, let's take a narrow focus. What would you like to do? So we set up video conferencing, which at that time, 7 years ago, was a new thing, right? And so we set up events, and we just had one today, where we have an ambassador connect to 5 or 6 classrooms in the state and talk to the students and give them that contact that they wouldn't normally have, in those remote areas. So that's kind of how it started. But as it's morphed, Allie and I have gone into the weird world of software platforms because of clients like you and like the World Affairs Council, who say, we've got this great content, we've got good curriculum, we want to develop learning experiences that will incorporate those live virtual events or live in person, in your case, in-person events, but also extend the learning in a way that makes it more accessible for students. And that's kind of one of the tenets of our company, is equity of access to students who may not have a chance to come to Archie Bray or come to be in Missoula to hear the ambassador or whatever. So we developed Mentoric software and the challenge platform that Chris now uses as a kind of a hybrid model, really, Chris, right? With the virtual speakers and then learning experiences. So I think just a brief overview of Geoquest, maybe, Chris, and how that works. And of course, I can help fill in the blanks. And then Stephanie, let's just answer some of your questions. So let's go ahead, Chris.
So a very brief overview of one of the programs that we do with Inspired Classrooms. It's a program called Geoquest. So here's the full enchilada, because I think a lot of these pieces say a lot about what we're trying to do, but also what Inspired Classroom does with us. First of all, is that we had been for years running a kind of program like this. Kathleen mentioned we would have an ambassador, a thought leader, somebody, a renowned person, and we would get them into an online video conference with a number of classrooms. And that's really interesting. If you're talking about some issue and the kids all around the state are engaging with this person on, say, a 1 hour, 45-minute video conference, super interesting. But we were also then working with Kathleen and Allie and said, can we take this a bit further? Is there a way that we can get beyond just a kind of video interaction into a little bit more substance? And so it's really important to say that together with Inspired Classroom, because I think that this is something that the people who watch this need to understand, is you don't need to come with the full idea and be like, okay, Kathleen, I want this whole thing, and this is exactly how I see it, and this is exactly what I want. We didn't approach it in that way. We just said, we think there's something better and more interesting. We've seen the other things that you do. Can we do something like that? And so benefiting from Kathleen and Allie's experience as teachers, knowing, how teachers would want this kind of content, knowing Montana curriculum standards, and knowing what they could offer, we put it together. And so now you have the original elements of this online video conference, if you will, with a famous person, an ambassador, say, which is very common for us. But in addition, you have their Inspired Classrooms Challenge platform, which is an online learning facility. I guess, Kathleen, maybe you'll be showing a bit of that later. But what that does then is instead of 45 minutes talking about Sudan, now students get the opportunity to go online and have an online, very engaging learning experience about Sudan. We populate a kind of Google Map-like thing, a platform with different content, with video, with audio, with, culture, religion, food, music, and all of this stuff to get kids like, wow, what Sudan? Wow, what's going on there? And they're going through this stuff in class with their teachers, and it's being facilitated also by Inspired Classrooms, who are helping the teachers deliver this content. In addition, the thing I really love about this is the opportunity that students can also input content into this. Like, for instance, they see that in Sudan, cattle herding is a big deal. Well, then kids, out in Drummond can say, I live on a ranch. My family are cattle farmers, and this is the way we do it. And it's interesting to see that Sudanese are actually, they do it very similar, or they do it way different than we do, whatever. So our program now, Geoquest, has this additional element that we really like, and I know that those people who use it really like as well. And so that's the kind of that's the slice on Geoquest. I'll just add quickly once again that nonprofits or others who are watching this will have different approaches to this idea. Our approach, particularly when we're dealing with classrooms around Montana, is we provide this entirely free. So what does that mean? It means we do fundraising so that we can, pay the bills of an amazing program like this. And we don't then have to ask a school, hey, even to say, hey, you have to pay $100 to come online for this. That's just not going to happen for most schools, and certainly not those schools that are our priority schools, those rural and reservation schools. That's not going to be the case. So we're able to bring this thing all across Montana to students in a really engaging and interesting way that you know, cool speakers, cool content, but then you also just, the last thing I'll say for, especially for middle school and high school learners is, you know, the thing that Kathleen and Allie drew to our attention is the 21st century skills, or the skill set that students you know, are suggested to kind of master or kind of learn about, in addition to the content and the substance of something like, you know, can you communicate? Can you use technology? You know, there's a set of 21st century skills that when we also approach a program with Inspired Classrooms, we want to say, hey, not only are you getting this really cool stuff, not only do you get these engaging videos, not only do you get this platform, but you know, you're meeting certain education standards, be they bolted directly into Montana curriculum, or be they more broadly these 21st century skills, whereby the students who come through this are learning these things. It's not a kind of, well, we really hope that they have a fun time. We really hope that, you know, this was interesting. It's more than that. It's not, you know, of course I do hope those things, but it's more explicit than that. And the 21st century skills has been a very helpful way for us to talk to teachers and to talk to other people and sponsors and donors and say, we're not just doing this for the sake of putting more stuff out on the internet. We're doing it to support learning and to support our students to become, you know, more learned, more engaged students and citizens. Wow, I'll stop there. I'll keep going. Back to you, Al.
You can tell he's really excited about this. Thanks, Chris. And I think that's just a really, really good point. As a organization, the ability to vet content and to have content that is, that you know is high quality, that the students are getting, so that they're just not wildly out there Googling things, you know, or the teachers aren't wildly out there Googling, hey, I need a lesson plan for this, to kind of have a package put together for both the student and the teacher that helps them bring a quality to that interaction. Stephanie, do you have thoughts, ideas that you want to share with us, or questions?
One question I have is do you have, either of you have any experience in running some of these offerings in more of a cohort format where you're meeting with students over and over on a regular basis, or are these primarily putting together content packages that fit within a specific lesson plan that can be delivered individually?
Well, that's a really good question. And the way that the platform is built, and that's something that we could schedule a second offline, really specific conversation about design. But one of the things that we say about what we've done with World Affairs Council and some of our other clients is it's really content agnostic, but it's process forward. So the way that you design the learning experiences and then push them out to your group of learners, your teachers and your students, is really up to you. And so, for example, World Affairs Council has said with Geoquest, which is one of their programs, we really want to create something that is probably for 5th or 6th grade students up to 12th grade. And so the content is focused that way. And they said we want short modules that teachers will be able to pick and choose what they'd like to do within that. And so the way that they have decided to create something is really kind of up to them and the way that they want to deploy it. And so to answer your question, yes, you absolutely could create content in the box that is our platform, and then use it and say, you know, it's going to be the fall cohort of classes. They're going to, you know, you're going to have them all register and work with them together. One of our other clients is the Missoula Art Museum, and I actually have a mentor meetup with Jenny, and I don't know if you know Jenny Bevel and Kay Grisham Kiley over there, but and the way that they use it, which is a lot more teacher directed and not as much student interactive, because they're touring the museum, they're doing art projects, they're, that kind of thing. So they've designed their curriculum a little differently than what World Affairs Council does. And so it is very, the way, what we have found in working with teachers and students virtually across the country is that it's never one box that fits everybody. And when you think of traditional education, you've got your textbook and you've got your teacher's manual and you've got your worksheets, and pretty much it's a box, right? That's built this way. And art particularly doesn't fit that way, and then when you talk to teachers, they say, well, we don't do it that way. We go off book and we find all these other things and we bring them together in a rich learning unit. Well, those are the kinds of things that we've heard and tried to understand and build in with our clients, and is so that it's never one size that fits all. It's very customized to what your goals are and what you think your learners' goals are. So yeah, that's and I think you mentioned going off book with not the static Zoom talking head thing. Exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing we do a lot of is training in how to teach over Zoom.
Yeah.
Which is like, there's strategies and there's, so we, we've done a lot of that with other clients too, a lot of training that goes along with that too. Yeah. Chris and his group use us primarily, and they're pretty good at doing this, and their events are one time, here's the ambassador, he comes on and he speaks for 45 minutes and pretty much then they're done.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that full instructional piece that you would normally do in teaching.
Sure.
Yeah.
How about real quick, just because of the focus on virtual, how about capturing student engagement or receiving feedback from the instructors who are leading the classes or from the students themselves? Are you able to to collect that, to get the feedback you need? And
go, Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about what you've seen from your point of view, and then I can talk about it from a technical piece.
Well, Kathleen, I think you ought to go first, actually, because
Okay.
I think I understand Stephanie's point, and I think at least if I was asking that same question, I'd want to hear the technical side first.
Okay. Well, so the way that the platform is used with World Affairs Council and our other clients is there's actually 4 dashboards. There's the authoring dashboard, which is a manager dashboard. There's the teacher dashboard, which the teacher has the ability to put students into groups, to see their responses, to manage them in that way, to have resources. They can have their lesson plans in there. They can have videos. They can have whatever they need to teach it in there. And then there's the student dashboard, which has a library of resources for them to do what they need to do in it. And with the student dashboard, there is a function. So I said it's process forward. So it's usually set up in steps. And within that, the step process, you're walking through an activity or a learning experience. And let's say you do step 1, you're going to research a specific artist in your case. You would have all the materials in the student library for the students to do that. And then they have a response box that they can respond in by clicking and adding answers. They can file upload. So they can put responses in there that the teacher will see. And if they're on teams, they see each other's work. So the 3 or 4 kids on a team, they would work together. They would put in their responses together and they could see that. So that's the 3 dashboards. The 4th dashboard, because we feel like this is super important, particularly when we're working with folks like the World Affairs Council and like you're experts. And one of the things that students don't get to hear a lot from, they get to hear from their teacher and feedback from their teacher, but they don't necessarily get expert feedback. And so there's a reviewer dashboard that, for example, Chris could go on and see projects that students have uploaded, and there's a rubric. He can give them a numerical feedback and narrative feedback. And then that goes to the students so they can see what that expert is saying about their project, as well as, of course, the teacher can always grade it and do whatever teachers need to do. So yeah, it is pretty interactive as far as that goes, and pretty, you have the teacher, both the teacher and the organization have the ability to see that. Now, that being said, it also complies with student privacy. So Chris will never see a student identifier. He won't know what the name of the student. He'll maybe know a team name that goes in, because with minors, you know, we can't have that. The teacher will be able to see the students, but the organization will never be able to. So that's nice too. And then the reporting function that comes out of it, you as the organization, you can go in and see what student responses are. And there, I think, Chris, I printed you something out last year that was like 30 pages of student responses. So you can see what they're doing. And then you also get the stats of, you know, what schools are using it, what their free and reduced lunch rate is, you know, how many students they have, that kind of thing, which is great. Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I mean, I would say a couple things. One is, in the same way in which we develop the content of the program directly with Kathleen and Allie, I guess, Kathleen, to a certain extent, you know, if a client needs a certain kind of feedback or needs a certain kind of something or other, that you're going to work with them to you know, to get that bit. For us, you know, primarily in the initial stage. By the way, I should mention that we are now in the second year of Geoquest. So last year was our pilot year, and it was really a kind of proof of concept. And so the metrics, or what we were interested in getting back, was primarily, you know, who's on, how many, and where are they from? And then we would, you know, sometimes ask separately for some, you know, some feedback from schools and students. Now, there is the engagement that Kathleen is talking about on the online platform that, you know, is, you know, part one. But part two, maybe, Stephanie, I'm not sure which was the thrust of your question, but, you know, I also want to get more distinct and clear feedback about the content. Like, was this useful? How would you change it? You know, how could you see this going ahead? Those are things that we're going to be bolting onto these programs as we go ahead, because we need to hear back from those who are using it as to, you know, is this thing working for you in the way you want it to, and then adjust accordingly. All of that said, back to the first point, which is, if that's your thing, I'm sure, you know, Inspired Classroom, I guess, I don't want to speak for you, Kathleen, but I know having worked with you, that this is part of the way in which you work, which is, okay, you're saying you need this kind of thing as the assessment phase of your program. Okay, let's bolt it on in this way. Does this work for you? You know, and so on. So
we try to do that. Yes.
Yeah, you try to do that. And I think that's the way that I've found the normal way of work. And so,
well, and helpful. Stephanie, I used to be a principal and a curriculum director. And one of the things that drove me crazy is seeing great programs that had come out one year and then gather dust, you know? So yeah, we kind of want them used well, and really support kids in getting these great expert experiences, and support the teachers in what they're doing too. If you haven't any other questions or ideas?
I think you two have touched on most of it. I have lots of notes in front of me, so I feel like I got a lot from this.
Great.
Well, Kathleen, I mean, I would like to add one thing.
Yeah.
And also, Stephanie, to get your reaction to this. It's just a good chance to have a little back and forth thing. And so Again, like I said, this is only our second year, so we're still learning a lot about the program and the platform that is this more integrated kind of, there's a lot of substance there. It's beyond the old just let's get on and watch and listen to somebody. But that entire challenge platform and its use. However, I would say it looks like this from where I sit. The creation of the architecture of this program and of any program and the content or the substance inside that architecture is something that we found with Inspired Classroom super helpful. And because we're serious about our work, as I'm sure you are, and anybody else who's watching this, you're going to be serious about the content that you put inside of a program. So to me, when I look at the moving parts, the content and the architecture, and then all of the tech, like the back end stuff, all of that stuff works. It's, you have to make the effort and all of that, of course, but that's really the working thing. And therefore, for people like me, people like you see it and you're like, whoa, this is so cool. This is so amazing. Wow, this is just, and it is. I mean, the wow factor is huge. Then comes the reality. Now, part of this is tainted by our COVID 18 months. And it's just been crazy in schools, which is our primary constituency. So I have to add the caveat right away that, of course, teachers' ability to engage in these programs, do these programs, it's been difficult. It's not been, from a non-teacher, my kind of common sense, or I thought was common sense approach was, whoa, everybody's, stuck on the virtual school last year. So they're going to love our stuff and we're going to get tons of people. Well, we got a lot of people, but in fact, for many teachers, they were simply overwhelmed by anything and therefore not able to engage to the number that I thought we would get. Now, that said, so that's the reality of this last year. I don't know if that's going to give us any lessons into the coming years, but it's the caveat needs to be said. But the point is this, is that the substance and architecture and so on, you can make this great thing, but you got to get people to fill the room, just like any of your programs, right? Any nonprofit's going to have a program. You're thinking this is going to be dynamite. And then 3 people show up and you think, what did I do wrong? How is this? Part of that is our COVID year, but a big challenge, I think, in going ahead. Now I'm looking ahead now, not behind us, but ahead in virtual and hybrid programming is you'll get the wow factor for sure, because we're serious about our work and you're serious and Inspired Classroom is serious. Now it's the marketing, promotion, and communication. And how do you get that right in the post-COVID, Zoom fatigued world? I don't have the answer, but I encourage you and anybody listening to this to give this some really serious thought, because you just want so much for such a cool thing, for such a great substance, to have everybody dialing into this thing. But it's not a kind of a slam dunk. Not that it ever has been or ever will be, but it's a challenge that I didn't maybe fully think about. Now, I'm going to say one last thing, which is a big part of filling the room is the responsibility of the Montana World Affairs Council on our programs. Kathleen and Allie help us to a certain extent. They've got a big network here amongst schools and so on. But it's really, it's primarily our responsibility. I am going to say this to Kathleen in encouragement of great work, which is, the more you can help us on marketing and promotion, the more business we're going to put your way, the more you could maybe hire a marketing and promotion person to help us fill those rooms. Wow, that would be dynamite. And then it would go crazy, right? So just know that from my perspective, we got a lot of help from Inspired Classroom. We try to do our own thing, but it's a thing like it's always been probably. But in the virtual world, in this time, it needs a lot of thinking and it needs a lot of effort to get it right.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's just it. The curriculum, creating engaging curriculum is always the goal, right? And that's the exciting part and that's the motivating part. How to fill the room, as you say, is always the trick, in person or virtual. And then what I find one of the biggest challenges is exactly that Zoom fatigue, that screen fatigue, how to build curriculum that is engaging in their physical space as well as on their screen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we've seen is kind of this ebb and flow. You know, when the pandemic first hit, it was like, don't talk to us. We can't handle it, you know, overwhelm. And then everybody kind of got their breath going, and it was like, okay. And then the first of this school year, there was a lot of optimism and willingness to look forward. And now it's gone back to crazy world. And I would even say this right now it's worse than it was during the pandemic, you know, because I don't know if I'm in class. I don't know if my kids are going to get pulled. It's very, you know, it's very hard for folks to plan. But our feeling is that if we can create engaging things with amazing partners, and then there's always those teachers who are early adopters. If we can get them on board and then have them help share that in a professional community, I think it's slow, but I really feel like if we can kind of keep the ship going forward, that when things do calm down and people feel a little bit more like they can have some more control over their lives, that they may be they're going to be more ready to engage this way. And also we've heard from teachers that it's not, Zoom isn't as bad as I thought it was. You know, it's I'm kind of getting it now, you know, so that's good, because we've been at it for a long time. So it's nice to hear them finally go, oh, we get it now. And that's what we're trying to do. But the other thing we're trying to do too is have these meetups with organizations, with people like you all, because there is a lot of desire out there to support learning with students, with teachers, and with adult learners. But also organizations tend to be islands, you know, and it's really, really hard if you don't have anybody you can go to and say, how did you do this? Or did that work for you? Or what problems and challenges are you having? And do you have any advice? We have found that there's not a really good community of practice for virtual learning from the organization perspective either. And so that's one thing that we're trying to do with these meetups. So we appreciate you tuning in. I'll be glad to send you a little bit more information, particularly about the MAMS program. And then if you'd like to really schedule a drill down date, that, you know, to really look at things and talk about ideas and stuff, we will make you crazy with all of the ideas. Right, Chris? We make people crazy. That's our tagline now.
Yeah, that's perfect. No doubt.
Yeah.
Crazy in a good way, in the best way.
Yeah. So we really appreciate your time, Chris. Thank you so much. I think just, again, building that community of practice and saying, yeah, we've been there and we're trying, and it's not always easy, but keep at it, you know. And thanks, Stephanie, for coming in. So
thank you.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Good to meet you, and good luck.